Welcome to CISOs Insiders podcast, powered by GRC Consulting. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing leading CISOs and security leaders in the industry for light, eye-level conversations. Here, they share advice and tips, talk about their biggest accomplishments and failures, favorite drinks, key influencers, and much more. We encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more content, please check us out on social media.
Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm speaking to Leland Cogburn, and Leland has been an information security professional for over 30 years now. I know that you mentioned that you started off, doing a few years in law enforcement, spent some time in the Navy, did some red teaming work, and before moving to the civilian sector. I think it would be best if you could step in and introduce yourself properly, Leland.
Sure. My name is Leland Cogburn. I've been in the security and the information technology industry for roughly about 30 years. Got my start in the Navy, working in telecommunications, getting exposed to OC-48s and some of the higher tech things, to a 22-year-old kid, was kind of interesting. So I got a lot of exposure to high tech things that really wowed me at the time. Got out and started doing a lot of we didn't call it cybersecurity back then, but I was in the room when they coined that term. That kind of tells you how long that's been. But yeah, I've been around the cyber world for about 3 decades, long before it was standardized and before you had something that was very structured around it. So for me, I basically grew with the industry, grew with the innovation, grew with what's considered normal. Normal changes all the time. So when I got into the civilian sector, for me, IT was very easy. IT networks. I was an engineer at a medical distribution company back in Virginia. That company sent me out to California, and I've been out here ever since. I've worked my way up into director roles, CIO roles, CISO roles. I really like to keep my hands on technology. I'm one of these guys that, if you wanted to say what's your managed style, I'd love to say that I manage by example, because I like to roll up my sleeves and do the work, but still also maintain that strategic posture, knowing how to deliver information to a board or one of the things I've always been credited to is being a good communicator. And I don't want to try to copy Ronald Reagan or anything, but meaning that I can talk to a CEO or I can talk to a janitor and give them the same complex information in just a different vernacular, of course, until they understand it very well. So yeah, I've been around for a while. I would say that my favorite role is probably something that where I'm at now. I'm a director of information security, and I'm able to dive in and hands off and look at the strategic view. And I'm valued, and my team is small, so we're expected to do a lot of work with a few resources, and IT security folks definitely know what that's like and how to work that.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for that introduction. So, the intent of this podcast is not to ask you too many questions about your company. It's more about you, right? We want to understand what makes, professionals in this industry tick. We want to learn about your journey, about your past successes and failures, and all that good stuff. But before we dive right in, I always ask a couple of icebreaker questions here. If you're willing to share your marital status and favorite drink, that would be great.
Married almost 20 years, coming up on 20 years actually here in January. If you're talking non-alcoholic, Diet Coke. If you're talking about alcoholic, Bloody Mary.
Wow. Okay.
Little
Interesting
spicy.
choice. Yeah. Interesting choice. I like the Bloody Mary mix they have on airplanes. I don't like the Bloody Mary itself so much. The vodka, I think, takes away
Yes.
the good flavor for me. And yeah, if I could, I would drink Coke, not Diet Coke, all day, every day. But trying to avoid it. Anyway, so yeah, let's dive right in. If there was one thing you wish you had known before you began your career, what would that be?
The war with cybercrime and attacks would be perpetual, meaning that I thought there would be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And as long as there's the ability to compute artificially, we'll always have the need for cybersecurity. Coming from law enforcement, the military, having an intelligence background, I get a sense, that a lot of the digital world would become easier if everybody had this same knowledge at some point in the future. I thought whenever I was in the civilian world that somebody's going to get a hold of this and everybody's going to know the same thing that I do, and then I'll go and cut weeds or something, and I would do something else. Hasn't changed yet.
Well, let's just as a follow-up question on this, what made you think this would would have like a beginning, middle, and an end, though? Because it's a theater like any other theater of two actors like combated one another, right?
Yeah, I thought somewhere along the way the war would win, knowing that there is really just a quantitative and a qualitative answer for that. When you look at, say, 30 years ago, where technology wasn't as advanced as it is now, somewhere and every step of the way, technologists look at it and say, we've taken this as far as we can take it. What's the next step? And then the new thing becomes old hat. And then the next new thing comes on. So we were in an era where, the Pentium processor was, the big thing. And it was a big thing for the longest time, if you recall.
I
the
recall.
next big step was, the Pentium 2, and then, Itanium came around. So, you had a lot of computing constraints because they were trying to make everything double in speed in so many months and get everything smaller and smaller. So I thought there was going to be a finite point where all of that was going to, come to a head, and cybercrime would too. Because people would become their own cybersecurity expert, their own IT support. But that hasn't happened. You still need these specialists all over the place, and there's such a demand that there's a shortage. So I guess it's good. Otherwise, somebody like me would have gone the way of dinosaur a long time ago.
Yeah, that's for sure. And okay, and what do you consider your biggest failure was, and what did you learn from it?
Biggest failure, I would have to say, and every decade was different. Taking more time for the most important things in life is probably what I learned from going and doing what needs to be done, spending more time at work, spending time around the world, doing all these things. I think I would have made more time for family, spouse, parents. My parents aren't with me anymore. Those kind of things, I guess, would be, regrets. But if we could go back in time, yeah, definitely take more time for vacations and time for, number one, for personal health and for personal mental health.
Yeah, that's a good point there. What would you say your biggest accomplishment was?
Well, if you're talking about saving the free world, that's probably still classified. Just kidding. All honesty, I would say educating others, imparting knowledge on another and giving him or her the ability to move forward in an educated and well-prepared manner is probably the greatest gift you can give to anybody. I like being a mentor, being an advisor. I do that also as as a consultant basis, for companies and people, and I take on, if you're in a Star Wars mindset, a Padawan, and you take on a couple of those here and there, bring them up, and then their successes become your successes, and there's just this real good satisfaction that you were a part of that.
Interesting. And are you open for any new Padawan experiences then? Any candidates?
I've got one right now, in fact, and he's getting ready to start up with me again. So he's worked for me on and off for several years, and he's turned into a very good individual.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah, and I've noticed that many of the folks that I'm talking to, are very reachable when it comes to mentorship, just mentoring others. Seems like a lot of professionals out there just, would love to instill some of their information into the younger generation. Definitely, that's a good thing, I would say.
Yeah, if somebody's willing to listen and willing to, run with it, folks that have been in it a while have already made those mistakes that others haven't even thought of yet, and we've learned from them. So why let them trip up whenever you've got somebody willing and listening, impart that information?
Yeah. Although, you know what they say, sometimes you learn the best from getting your hands burned, right? Time to time. But yeah, that's how kids learn. So, any advices that you could give out to like the younger listeners out there, or to anyone actually that want to pursue a career in cybersecurity?
Be humble and listen. That would be your first step. Listen and get all your hands on all the information you can, all the aspects, and educate yourself is what I'm trying to say. There's the basics, and you've got to have a foundation. And in cybersecurity, what's being thrown at you changes on a dime from day to day, from moment to moment, right? Only when you have some of that foundation can you develop a technology change into a strategy and a roadmap on what you need to do and to combat those things that you face, so that you can support business goals. The next thing I would say would be to don't jump immediately. Get all the facts and base decisions around your known facts by speculation or just jumping without having all the information. I've been burned so many times in my past when it seemed like the sense of urgency was right there, and you go and you make a decision on something that you didn't have all the facts, you didn't have all the information, and you go, shame on me, I'm not going to do that again. And then a year or two it goes down the road and you do it again, of course. So definitely pause, get all your facts, set that emotional intelligence, so that you're not jumping out of a reaction, or somebody else is pulling your strings, for example. With that, I would say test your boundaries, all of them. See what you can do. Give yourself the ability to learn how far you can push. Along with that, don't take no for an answer. There's no, and then there's the real no, right? And I would think that if it's about your career or something you feel really strongly about, or it's the right thing to do, then pursue it by all means. Definitely be strong and committed. Definitely pursue, that avenue of decision making. That's probably the best advice I think I could come up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say these are great advices. Especially, I would say like the first one is something that really, many people need to learn the hard way. The humility and, be humble, listen first. I think, especially when people start off, they tend to maybe not be as humble and not listen too much before they provide their opinions. And not to say that people need to be quiet, but sometimes need the need to listen and really understand that there are other people out there that you really want to learn from. And I've made that mistake when I started off as well.
I think when you listen with the intent of understanding instead of my turn to transmit, then you really understand the person and the situation, and then you have productive conversation back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Now, I always like to tackle this, like the CISOs position in an organization, as you probably know, some CISOs report to an IT-related functions, where others might report to a different different role in the organization, right? So for those CISOs that are a part of the IT organization, what do you think about it? What are the pros and cons? What's your personal opinion about that structure?
I would think that the pros is you're around people and a department that understands your language, understands concepts of what you're working with computers. Reaching out for support, for example, is probably the most easy and the most efficient. I find that help desks, EUCs, and user computing, they want to help. They're tickled to death that they get to help the cybersecurity function, and that's very much appreciated. I think when you're in a well-structured company, the processes that you have engaged within the IT camp, well, that can be pro and con, I guess, but it's much better to be solo and the security piece there. The con, I guess, would definitely be you're always competing against other departments in IT for budget, for resources, project approvals. Usually those are, the software folks, maybe infrastructure folks. The software folks seem to always get theirs, especially if they're, customer facing, or if they have anything to do with the sales function. Many companies I've been in operate like that. Another con, definitely, and it's not indigenous to any one company. I think most companies have it, is fiefdoms. Fiefdoms and silos pop up inevitably in IT. They do in other functional areas, but it's very noticeable in IT, and it's difficult to pry permissions. The guy that holds the keys to the kingdom, for whatever reason, maybe somebody left and now he's the guy holding everything. He doesn't want to let go of that anymore, and he wants to add value, and he wants to be the hero and the sole guy. So getting that back into the right roles and responsibilities is very hard, but it is at the center of your fiefdoms, and it makes it inefficient, difficult, and insecure at the bottom line for everybody.
Okay, thank you for that. Next thing I wanted to touch on is, you've been in the industry you mentioned for 30 years now, and you have to stay current. You have to constantly adapt, learn. What would you say were the best resources that have helped you along the way?
I would say probably the establishments of SANS, ISACA, ISC squared. Those are structured. They update, they change regularly, so you're getting the latest and greatest from them. On like a daily routine, staying up to date on what's current right now. I mean, Dark Reading, Cybercrime Magazine, a lot of the different vendor blogs, InfoSec Institute, they're great resources, especially the vendor blogs, because they're putting information out there at a moment by moment. Maybe it's 0 day, maybe it's something that's impacting their software. But a lot of times, on really good vendors, they're out there just putting the information out there, so they're doing their part to protect the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'd also have to say, mom and dad, at the core of all that, they provide the foundations of my stability. My ethics, values, courtesy, respect, and consideration was something mom always said, and responsibility, autonomy, hard work, that was dad. So I've got the best of both of them.
Nice. Thank you for that, for sharing. Is there one myth about our profession that you wanted to debunk?
Well, the little cloaked guy in black has followed me all these years. They called us spooks in the Navy. You had the little guy with the dark shades and the shadowy person in the dark room, hovering over a computer. I think it was a baseboard hacker, that kind of thing. Basement hacker. That's always followed me. So I think that's kind of cute, because we're not in a dark room. Well, I guess I'm kind of in a dark room right now, but no, I've got something up here on my top of my monitor. It's something that about 26 people at the current company has told me, in not so many words or another, that quote unquote security is there to watch us or to be speed bumps in the way of progress. And I've heard those, and it couldn't be further from the truth. We're there to partner with the business and provide guidance and advice based on an intimate knowledge of the cyber world, and where actions or activities at certain websites will cause you some grief, or misconfiguring a computer, or a social media exposure might be asking for trouble, or at the very least, getting the wrong kind of attention. Those kind of things are our responsibilities. And what I am very sensitive to is, I don't want to get in the way of efficiency. I do know that it's a balancing act of security and operations. What makes the money. So in my mature approach to this is there's a balance, and there's this appetite for security, whether it's process, whether it's revenue, or whether it's putting a firewall in something that we just can't have.
Mm-hmm. And there's always also the appetite for risk, right? So if an organization has the appetite and is willing to assume more risk than the average organization out there, that's fine as well, as long as they're signing off on that.
Yeah, we're collecting that, putting it in a risk register, and moving on. And,
exactly. Yeah,
we have those mitigating and compensating controls, whatever they may be, and we move on and deal with the next thing.
mm-hmm. So, in your opinion, and you've been in the industry for quite some time now, what are the main concerns that CISOs nowadays have?
Nowadays, I know what keeps you up at night is, are you monitoring enough? Are you detecting everything? Are you able to respond to threats 24/7? Are your vulnerability and remediation service levels sufficient? How quickly can we remediate those criticals? We say ASAP, but is that true? How fast can we get those highs? So I think a lot of that is, how do those security improvements get put in place? Now with cloud security, I think about 2/3 of InfoSec leaders, they all believe their organization is, vulnerable to attack, and whether they communicate that out to the leaders of the company, that's another story. A lot of them, it's got to be how they communicate that and prepare people for it. Another main concern that CISOs have to really keep in mind is your users, your end users, also known as that that inside threat. What is their level of awareness? Are they getting enough security education and time to prevent ransomware or a phishing or a scam? Or are they armed with information and stats and history that they don't get bored and they don't roll their eyes every time they see, this is Lee again, that kind of thing. But when we give them this information and they still go on a trip and they take their phone, they take all their personal equipment, and they get their laptop and they go to Russia or China, I'll call it out, and they've got plain text passwords out there, and they have that "this could never happen to me" mentality. Oh, that is a main concern. I guess the firewall too. The bad guys on the other side knocking at the door constantly. I see the traffic all the time. I look at my firewalls and I see the threat logs, and a perfect example is Log4j. December 9th, last year, it arrived. We saw immediate, remote code execution jump, from 400 to 900%. And what I started to do is just create a separate metric just for Log4j alone, just that related activity, apart from web application attacks, just so I can see how much this is going on. In the early summer, it seemed like it was like almost a denial of service event was going on. But my concern is, are the firewalls always doing their job? Are they up to date? Are they doing URL filtering correctly? So, constantly testing the efficiency and the effectivity of your security tools is paramount. So those are just some of my small concerns, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And to follow up on this, are there any specific areas, in your opinion, that leaders in the industry should be most focused on right now?
Yeah, I would say if you had a well-rounded strategy with a team that has the technical skills as well as the business acumen, uh, you have a solid information security management system and a well-defined policy framework, and metrics that definitely measure, improve your effectiveness, and demonstrate business value. I think you're on a good start there. Um, Another one is probably paramount to me. I'm very well aware of the other functional areas in business, and the customers are, as they always say, are always right. So building and retaining the trust of the customer, um, that's critical for growth and stability, and definitely for your budget to scale security operations. Um, that enhances your credibility, and once your credibility goes up, I mean, you're doing what you said you would do, which in definition is accountability. Accountability breeds trust, and when you enhance that credibility, it only helps manage risk and opportunity in the company much better. The approach you take with the customers can then probably be even applied to the rest of your organization, its users, because that change into the security culture, we'll inevitably talk about that, I guess, but um, culture change is not something that's just a flip on a switch and you're done. That takes years, and it takes you a lot of patience and effort to get that culture. I've been in companies where they think it's a meeting, and then next week, what's the result? That's not the case. Culture is a hard thing to change. It gets to how we work together, how we operate together, whether we respect each other, and what's important to us. And if security is not important to us, that culture is going to have a hard time to change.
Mm-hmm. And we started talking about the role of the CISO briefly in one of the previous questions. And I know you mentioned that, like, you look at the firewall logs and all that. So obviously there's been a transition, right, in the past probably decade or so, from a more technical focused role to somewhat business oriented role. In your opinion, what are the most important skills that CISOs nowadays should have?
Well, that business acumen I referred to, that has to be incumbent on the technical leader, the CISO. If you don't have knowledge of what your peers, in the organization and the other functional areas, finance, sales, operations, quality, purchasing, you've got to be able to speak their language, because you can't expect them to speak yours. So I found a long time ago, it's prudent for me to get what I need to get done, and to get the things that I need to do, to learn their language, to learn their processes, to learn how to make it easier for them to help me. So definitely business acumen, and to be able to talk their language, and give them what they need in the format and time and periods that they need. It's definitely going to help you. Technical background, I'm a firm believer in that. CISOs, CIOs went through that same thing here a while back, where I graduated a degree with an MBA, and maybe I'm a project manager, but now I'm your CIO. Okay, what kind of experience do you have? Well, I worked at 7-Eleven before, during college. Oh, great. Okay. So I do think that, a knowledge of, with a CISO, knowledge of programming languages, computer networks, systems, software, the tools you use on a daily basis to, affect control and affect change at a certain protective level. You've got to know that stuff. How else are you going to be able to improve, make suggestions, understand applications and limitations in your inventory, and give any insights into personal growth or innovation in the company, for the questions that ultimately come down to you, which is, are we secure? So I think that decision making is probably on the top of my list, if you were to ask that as well. I've got a number of things probably, but you've got to be able to quickly and effectively make good business decisions and execute them as well. It's critical, especially when there's a massive sense of urgency, right? You get older, you make mistakes, like I said earlier, that others haven't even thought of yet, but you've learned from them. So it's a part of your experience that helps make good, effective, and quick decisions. You've already put what not to do in that bad column, and it's just not a part of your bag of tricks. So I see people hem-hawing, what should I do? Maybe they go to the internet, they look something up. Indecisiveness in cybersecurity will get you ransomware, get you something that you don't want really quick. Good communication, I think that's another thing. You have to effectively communicate with other functional business areas, like I've been talking about, and work also with entry-level people, as well as mid-level people, as well as experts in their field, the subject matter experts. When you can communicate directly with these people and with the board, and you report on progress, especially with the board, you're asking for money, you're asking for budget, you're wanting more money to make more progress and ensuring that you meet those security goals and the objectives, right? Well, you've got to be able to translate your requirements and goals into digestible chunks of value and risk that a board needs, and so that they can appreciate, not how many widgets did you protect and how many doomahitchies at a macro level. That's way too in the weeds. You got to know your audience. So being a good communicator, I guess, would be that: communicating effectively, knowing your audience, and giving them what they need at their level and their role and responsibility. Accountability is another one. You keep hearing me hollering about that. That's doing what you said you would do. Over time, with your relationships with others, people's going to learn that you put more trust into strategies and suggestions, and they're going to back you on that just by your word, instead of going and starting to be very questionable about it. That's going to, again, build your credibility. Keep harping on these things. These are small little things. I mean, a lot of people think about all those tough skills that they go to college or go to a technical institute to learn, but some of these basics you can work on, yourself. Being organized. There's another one. Your ability to assess and prioritize appropriate assets that need to be protected. That's your first duty as a CISO, and it is to know your assets. You got to know what your crown jewels are in order to protect them, and to what level. Understanding and that and prioritizing, risks to protect those assets. When you convey those risks in terms that that a board of directors can understand, then they'll help you protect those assets too, because now they see the value and now they're motivated, right? But again, it's how you convey that message. Patience is another one. I know that I said that earlier. Changing everything in an organization, from its risk tolerance to the security culture, all the way down to processes and code that goes into things, that takes years of patience. And culture, like I said earlier, it doesn't change overnight. Another one, I guess, would be managing risk. When you're risk aware and you can translate that into business impact and requirements in a simple and safe manner, a good CISO is going to be looking for ways to plug holes in security, and he's going to ask the questions whether or not something's secure, right? Where are the biggest risks? What are the priorities at risk to the business? He's going to know how to manage that to his advantage and prioritize that to the company's advantage, so that you're not always, again, like when I get back to this board that's on the top of my my monitor, you're not going to be that speed bump. You're not going to be known as that. So there's some others, but I think those skills, I think you hear a lot of recruiting and strategic thinking. Those are important too, but some of these others you can learn, and you can it's either God-given or you learn it along the way, right? So it's some of these things, most people doing, I don't hear them talking about that, or me, have helped me along the way.
Okay, thank you for that insight. And in your opinion, we were talking about like the CISO role currently in current days. In your opinion, where is the CISO role going? Like, what would we see the CISO world to be in like 5-10 years into the future, in your opinion?
Well, he's a partner now. He's a planner and an evangelist. He's a vendor guru. He usually has, buddies that, are in all corners of cyber. So he's definitely that vendor guru. He's a constant innovator too. He's always innovating new ways of working, new ways of tackling that risk that came out. He's always evaluating, the likelihood and the impact. That's always in your head, that Boston Matrix. You just can't get it out of there because you're looking at, what risk is going to do to you. So you've always got to innovate ways to mitigate that risk. So I guess focusing on preventing threats, but creating systems that work for the business and still keeping everybody protected is going to be where he's going. I know 10 years down the road, you're going to have a lot more probably AI involved. You're going to have a lot more automated bots, the good ones, not the bad ones, hopefully. Because we've already seen the good, the bad bots, right? Botnets and and Ramnet viruses, those kind of things out there. It's time for the good guys to come into play. So I would think that a CISO role would help innovate and get that into place to where we have more automated and more AI tools down the road, because they're certainly getting used by the bad guys. It's our turn now, I think.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about transition and changes in the industry and in the roles themselves, are there any other changes that you foresee in the in this industry in the coming years?
Well, you see some of it changing already, especially during the pandemic. You see security as a service, managed services, managed detection and response, those kind of things. I think that's going to be more of the standard and more of the model for tools and daily response. I think holding companies, large corporations, they're going to be able to manage more child companies with this managed security approach. Cheaper, easier, and able to provide status and from a roll-up standpoint. And boards are going to understand this better because they're going to get the risks and the information in front of them quicker. So I think that's going to be something that's going to help scale investments into cybersecurity much quicker and easier. And then the CISO and his core team can manage risks and policies and compliance and some of their larger projects. They get approved along the way. I think firewalls, I've looked at some of my firewalls just in the last 5 years. Over time, different companies, they constantly get more tools, more security abilities and features added to them all the time. I think that's not going to stop. I think firewalls are going to be that initial security point, that point of presence out there on the edge. And you're going to have, browser isolation, URL filtering, data loss protection. I mean, some of the current next generation firewalls have this already, but I think it's going to become more of a standard, and it's just going to be de facto, to the point that you might even get a large part of all your security tools, SIM included, endpoint protection, everything in a box, and then you can utilize a lot better inside to external cloud activity from the firewall. And if you have cloud-based consoles and those kind of things, it's going to be a lot easier to deploy. It's going to be cheaper to maintain, and you don't have all of these other on-prem type applications and things sitting out everywhere, because everything's in your firewall and communicates out on its external port back to the vendor. And I think, along with that, the convergence of automation is just going to continue. I believe you're going to be able to handle incidents and threats quicker at the edge. Again, for the same thought process, you're further away from your internal network where more damage can be done. One of the the core, I guess, approaches to security is keep your threat as far away as you can get it. As a police officer, you never are told to get engaged in armed combat, right? How far can your PR-24, your baton, hit somebody, and you're you're a good 6 feet away, or you use your your revolver, your weapon, but try not to do that. When you're thinking about it like that, you're keeping your threat and you're keeping your something that can hurt you farther away. Same thing in cyber. I would think that that's going to take real good advantage of the future, keeping everything further on your edge, and leave more of the internal things to ACLs, routing, and access control lists, those kind of things, so that they're more controlling your ingress egress with your users, that have access to the networks that they're supposed to. I mentioned bots a while ago. I just wanted to touch that one again. I think you're going to have more devices and more connectivity. That means more risk. It means more security is needed, but you're going to have the same and some new vulnerabilities. Bots are going to be automated. Good guys are going to be out there. Bad guys are going to be out there in numbers. You already know that. But I think that's going to become more, de facto standard. So I think the continued rise of artificial intelligence is going to be with us. I think, I don't know if it's going to be Skynet, but, it's definitely
hopefully not.
Yeah, really. I think it's definitely going to be, your automated facial detection. I know the physical security access control, they have the automatic threat detection with the face, and then they can follow them as they walk around in your building, but AI is going to be able to analyze large quantities of data at a much faster rate. That's going to benefit companies that have large data requirements, or it's going to benefit the small, under-resourced security teams that can do more with less. So I think practical applications of AI is still developing. It's still a big debate out there, but I do think security tools are going to be driven more and more by AI and machine learning as we continue to grow with the sophistication and the capability.
Mm-hmm. And still speaking about growth and transition and the changes that we're seeing nowadays in the industry, did you see any recent changes or recent trends as the in regards to budget planning in the past, let's say 2-3 years?
Yeah. When was the last time something was normal? I think 2019, that was normal. So we had the pandemic. Yeah, and the pandemic in 2020, you had your normal budget, you had your resources, you had people, normal spend, right? Then about mid-year, it was cut 60 to 80%. Then in 2021, again, in the middle of the year, I know at the current company I'm at, we had some strategic investments that we got to make. We spent, $200,000 on a SIM. I think you're going to see more strategic investments as boards get comfortable and see the value and visibility, that cybersecurity adds. Vendors also, they were hit too, in the pandemic. Spending was cut across, everywhere. So they are also going to, I've seen it already. They're doing their markups, for this year and next year's subscriptions, and a lot of endpoint protection, those kind of things, as high as 15%. Legacy subscriptions, standard stuff like managed services, vulnerability management. I mean, the costs are increasing for everybody. Whatever the source, whatever the reason, it's either COVID, it's inflation, if you want to call it that. I hate to get into the politics piece, but the point is that I think this is the new normal, and so we've got to increase your budget ask, because if you don't, the company, the board, they're going to go, why is this unknown rise 15% across the board? And if you have 50% across everything, that's not $100, that's not $200, that's, depending on the size of your company, it could be in the millions of dollars. They'll want to know about that. And the better you're transparent, the better you can communicate, the risks and the changes in the trends. You've got to have that open dialogue with, your finance people and your senior management and, and board of directors, because they need to understand across the board, costs are going up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I see that we're coming up to the tail end of our episode. I just wanted to ask a couple more questions about vendors, if that's okay. So first one, let's say you're a vendor. What would be your approach to really, start building a relationship with a potential customer?
Well, just without thinking about it out of the gate, trust. I keep harping on that because I do think that a vendor is about building trust. So building a trust with that customer or a partnership, I definitely look for partnerships, opportunities to get to know that customer, not just as their company or the person, but what is it that's going to make that relationship more personal? What would help keeping accountable to that person? What are you going to do to accomplish, say, like for next year's needs, in cybersecurity? How are you going to stay on pace with the evolution of their needs and really try to stay ahead of their innovations, the things that they solve for themselves without your help, right? So being intimate with that company, that individual, their solutions, their issues, the technical concepts and your products, and then what's your competition doing, that's all going to have to, I'm going to have to understand that. And that's what I think most vendors are faced with. And that's going to be paramount, I think, to build an impression on somebody so that you can stay on pace with these innovations. Being engaged with the individual and the company is going to help with how fast or how slow they tackle those accomplishments. But what's the tolerance for risk, the tolerance for spend? That's usually, I'm very sensitive with my vendors. I see when they're checking in on those things. So I think I would probably emulate that same thing. Knowing when to stay away and when to get in their business and try to understand what does that forecast look like?
Mm-hmm. And so it's mostly around trust, and I totally agree. But do you have like any quick tips to how you actually, so, and I know you mentioned like a couple of ways there, but I think the obstacle that most vendors encounter is like how to, start a conversation with the potential customers or potential partners, right? And I think the approach that's prevalent right now out there is just cold calling. I mean, I get tens of calls a day. I get tens of LinkedIn messages, emails, all that, and obviously that doesn't work. Like, do you have any quick tips around how to get that initial conversation going?
Yeah, I get the same thing, and and some are very, very forward, and I will give them this. They have drive and determination, don't they?
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm turned off by sales pitches. I'm the son of a car dealer, so he was used car, and then he was used and new, and then he was new car. He was a Mazda dealer back in the day. So I get the sales pitch. I certainly understand it. I think that it is hard for vendors because I know people that have been around for a while. You've got that circle of vendors and people that you trust. You call them, you can do a handshake. You have those long-term partnerships, right? That's a hard circle to break into. I'll be the first one to admit that. But what it does is it protects me from just somebody that's looking to make a score, and then move on. And I'm not there. I'm somebody that wants that partnership. I want somebody looking out for me, somebody that's going to go to bat for you, look for your best interests, take the initiative, do the legwork, present the whatever it is, and making a decision easy on my part. And they communicate clearly and often, and it's not only when it's support tickets or something like that, or an annual, hey, we got a new thing, we want you to buy it. They constantly keep in touch with you. So I think when somebody cold calling me gives me a good pitch on reputation and capability, that's something that I'll listen to. I'll engage with them. What I don't like, and I think it's almost demeaning to a lot of us, and whether you're in for 30 years or 3 or a couple months, is you didn't know anything about this industry or this product or this control or the pillars until I showed up, kind of thing. And I'm going to help you. My company can do it because no one else can. And then you look them up and they're not even Dun and Bradstreet. They've never existed until this guy talked to you, right? So you get a lot of that and everything in between. So I would say, for somebody wanting to connect with me, LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm an active person on LinkedIn, whether I'm at my current company or just, keeping up with the times and keeping up with other people. That's probably the best approach. I know a lot of people don't like to use LinkedIn as a a vendor, networking, engagement, but until they need to do that and you need to reach out, then the shoe's on the other foot, right? So I think, because, and I'll be honest, and if there's anybody listening that are potential vendors and they're cussing me because I haven't responded, you're probably the same way, Ben. I've got, models and workflows in Outlook, that feed that cold call right down to the cold call folder, and kind of a don't call us, don't call you approach, except for the ones that you're starting to explore new relationships with, because frankly we've got it covered. I'm in multiple year contracts with a lot of vendors, so most of the things that you consider foundational, we've got covered. But there are some really cool, like we're talking about, new takes. What's going to be the next big thing? I'm always wanting to set up maybe a technology day and those kind of things. Every company should probably at least give it 1 or 2 days a year to see what these vendors have, and so that they bring their A game on that day and they show the nice shiny new thing that wows and gives us all the ooh, that's cool kind of thing. I used to do that before COVID and invite CFO or somebody from finance, so that it was strategic in purpose, because having them look at it and see what it does for you. Now, when I ask for it, if we go down that road, they've seen it, they've been exposed to it, and they know, okay, I remember that. I remember it cost a lot of money.
Thank you. And final question before I let you go. If money was never an issue, what would you do different with your life?
Oh, I've always had the movie industry and very, very near and dear. I'm out here in LA, right? I work in Burbank. I would have to tell Steven Spielberg to move over, or at least let's partnership on the next big movie with ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, struggling to survive, and have some kind of supernatural event going on. And we got to hurry about this, because John Williams isn't getting any younger, and he's got to score the soundtrack.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Thanks for that. And with that, I will let you go. I just wanted to say that I enjoyed our talk today. Thank you so much for carving out some time of your busy calendar. And hoping your questions to your answers to my questions would resonate with some of our listeners. And we'll tag you once this is live. And thank you again. Any final notes on your end?
No. I'll be curious to know if anybody understands or knows what the background is. So I'm not going to say it, because I want to hear what people have to say.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ben.